Good morning. Well, surprised you thought you were going to get a break from the judges, but somehow I returned. I drove 11 hours back yesterday so I could be back in time for this class. So Kevin was going to fill in for me, but instead you get to hear me. So I think I've got a time frame now that I'm going to try to have this wrapped up by the end of November, which means we have 8 weeks left. So we'll see how that goes. So Kevin will be teaching the next class after I get done. So I'm going to have the goal of being done in 8 weeks. So we'll see how we can do. We will continue our study of the Judges today. And before we begin, I've asked Brandon if he would to lead us in prayer.
Let's pray. Our holy God and our Father in heaven, we're so thankful, Lord, for this day that you've blessed us with and for this time that we can come together and study your word together. We are so thankful for your word, which gives us wisdom and gives us the insight that we need to be good to you and to the things that you would have us to be and to grow closer to you and be more like Christ, our Savior, who you've also blessed us with. We're so thankful for Christ and for the blessings that we have through him. We pray that you'd be with those who are not able to be with us this morning and not able to be through this study with us, that you might have a healing hand on them if they're sick, and be with those who are away traveling and keep them safe. We pray at this time that you would also be with Stacy as he's away, preaching your word, that you would keep him safe and bless him and his family. It's in Christ's most holy name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Before we start, does anyone need any pages of questions for the class today? I just printed out some more, so if anyone needs one, you can raise your hand. Looks like we're good. Okay. Continuing our study of the Judges today. As we talk about every week with these, just a reminder, the way that things work during the time of the Judges. This cycle would happen. It would start out with the Israelites forsaking God and turning to idolatry, and then God allows their enemies to defeat them as punishment. Then the people cry out to God for help in their distress. And so then God sends a judge who delivers them from their enemies, and then the land is at peace for the rest of the judge's life. And then our keynote verse on the Judges: in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. So last week, we were talking about we were continuing talking about the 14th judge, which is Eli, and we were in 1 Samuel chapter 4. So we were looking at where the Israelites are dealing with their enemy, probably the most notable enemy of the Israelites, the Philistines. And so we saw last week that they went to fight the Philistines in battle, and they lost. And so they were trying to figure out after the battle, what did they do wrong? Why did they lose the battle? And so that's where we saw in verses 3 and 4, as they're trying to figure out what they can do to have success in their battle, they decide they need to bring the Ark of the Covenant there, and they say that it may come among us and deliver us from the power of our enemies. So what was it that we said was the problem with that statement there?
They took it upon themselves to take the ark.
Yes.
And the ark doesn't make it as holy. I mean, only few people could even touch it.
Right.
And they're treating it as common.
Yeah, so we saw that they did not consult God or Eli or Samuel about this. They took it on themselves to do it. And you see how they're talking about the ark the Ark of the Covenant being the one that can bring them deliverance, but could the physical materials of the Ark of the Covenant itself deliver anyone in battle? No, it's just gold and other materials. What made it powerful was that that God gave it the power, and so because they didn't consult God, it wasn't going to have the power that they were wanting to get from it. Tom?
Yeah, their approach was just like the idolatrous people that were around them. All the other nations would have taken their gods before them, the gold
Right.
and the things that were man-made.
Right.
That's basically what Israel was doing. Let's put our God before these people.
Right. Was that the first time that they wanted to act like the nations around them? Or would it be the last time that they wanted to act? No. So, common thing that they had an issue with is they kept just wanting to be like the nations around them, but God's telling them you need to be different. You need to be the way I want you to be. But they were always trying to do their own thing. Jefferson?
I want to point out that when you talk about like they didn't consult with God, one of the things you think about like how could they not consult with God? How could they do this with the Ark of the Covenant? But it's like when you think about the person who consulted with God, the most, David, and he did something very similar like this. Not to battle, but he moved it without being told to, without consulting God, and there are consequences for that too. So
Right.
we can have this mindset too if we're not careful.
So is it important to pay attention to the details? If God says, this is what you're supposed to do with the ark, this is how the ark is supposed to be treated, could the Israelites just say, no, we're going to do it differently. We're going to take it into battle with us instead, or we're going to transport it on a cart. Would God not have any problems with that?
No, he didn't even have any mercy for Uzzah, and I always think sometimes, well, all Uzzah was doing was steadying the ark so it wouldn't fall.
Right.
You know, it's like you want to take pity on him, and I think he himself forgot that he wasn't supposed to touch it. It was only the Levites.
Right. And so that was really on David and the leaders of Israel that they shouldn't have put him in that position to have to do that. So that's why it's important to follow the details. There could be things like that seem like kind of inconsequential, but it's important to pay attention to the details. Like the Israelites here should have consulted God instead of taking it on themselves to bring the ark into battle. Kevin?
Well, this is where in today's world, people say, well, that's a cruel God. You know, why should I have faith in a man that would do something who was trying to do good? A man's trying to do good, but God still strikes him dead. You know,
Right.
I mean, Nadab and Abihu, all they were going to do is light the incense. They may have got fire from the fire pit at their house, but all they were going to do good. Well, that's not the law.
Right.
You know, and this is where our nation continues. Well, okay, he murdered somebody. Yeah, but let's determine why he did that. By the time it's over with, the guy's a saint.
Right.
You know, and so I mean, this is where we go astray because we just fail to understand God's law, and that was the law. The Levites were supposed to use the staves through the rings,
Right.
and only the priestly group were allowed to carry it.
Right.
That's the way it was supposed to be. So, when we compromise and then we try to rationalize and justify, that's where we get into so much trouble with religion.
Yeah, and that's a good point there. That the lost my train of thought. But yeah, the Israelites they should have followed God's direction. And yeah, we can't as far as like that it seems severe of what God does. We can't view God as we can't judge what God does as we would what a man does, because who is the only one that has the right to give and take life? It's God, right? So God gave everyone life. He has the right to take it back too. And so these things can look severe, but we know that God, and we've talked about before with like Nadab and Abihu, that God wants to kind of send a message in some of these cases whether it's Nadab and Abihu. You think about Ananias and Sapphira in the New Testament, kind of sending a message that you're not going to be treating me this way, that you have to treat me as holy or there's going to be consequences. And so we see here that the Israelites were not valuing the ark as they should, and not letting it serve the purpose that it should be, and also not consulting God the way they should. So they bring the ark into battle, and so Did having the ark in the battle with them give them success? Nope. Same outcome happened that we saw last week. And so in verse 10, it said that they were defeated. Every man fled to his tent. There was a great slaughter. And then the ark of God was taken by the Philistines. And those two sons of Eli were killed, which fulfilled the prophecy that God made to Eli that his two sons would be killed on the same day. So let's look at some of the fallout that happens from the result of this battle. So let's look at, well, first, before we get to that, let's do a little thought question here. Question 21 on the page of questions that I gave out. The thought question is, why would God allow his ark to be captured by the Philistines? This is the ark that he designated for the people of Israel to make. This is, a great, you could say, like the most significant, item of the law of Moses, the Old Testament there. So why would God allow that to be taken by, the enemies of the Israelites, the Philistines here that were not, that were idolatrous, that didn't follow God? Why would he allow that to happen?
Punish Israel.
Right. So there's two different perspectives to look at for this. So first, look at the side of the Israelites. What we've already talked about, the Israelites were not treating God as holy. They were not doing what they should be doing. We saw back in chapter 3 how they weren't getting a lot of visions, a lot of prophecies at this point because their spiritual state was in such a bad position. And so this was a learning point where the Israelites needed to learn to treat God as holy, to properly value his service, and to return to worshiping him alone. David?
Second to that, he knew that it was his presence that made the ark holy.
Right.
There was nothing the Philistines could have done to use the Ark of the Covenant in any
Right.
way. In fact, it backfired on them.
Yes, very much so.
They ended up paying the price for it themselves.
Yeah. We're going to see that they're going to try to use it in the service to their own God, but it's not going to go well for them. Jim?
It also shows the power of God to the Philistines.
Right.
Because when they tried to use it, they said that before their God, it fell down on its face.
Right.
And eventually, the next time, it fell and broke the hands and head off of it.
Yeah.
That was showing the power of God to them, that even though he allowed the Israelites to be defeated in that cause at that point, he was
Yeah.
still God.
Remember, we talk about through all this, what is God going to do no matter what happens? He's going to accomplish his purpose, right? So we look at it and say, how is this going to accomplish God's purpose? The Israelites being defeated and his ark being taken. But throughout all of it, we see that God's going to accomplish his purpose, and he's going to get the honor he deserves from it. So, so we see with the Israelites that this was to teach them that they needed to properly value God. So we see when we get past this and the ark comes back, we'll see in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 3, when Samuel talks to Israel, he tells them, if you return to the Lord with all your heart, remove the foreign gods and Ashtaroth from among you, and direct your hearts to the Lord and serve him alone, and he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. So they needed to devote themselves to God, and then God would be with them. And so this was how they were going to learn their lesson by losing the ark and having it go into the hands of the enemies. And then on the other side of it, talking about the Philistines, like you were saying, Jim, that the Philistines needed to learn that God has the power, not their gods, and through it, God would be honored. And so we saw that they recognized the power of God because they were talking about, before the battle, they were recognizing what God had done with the Egyptians with all the plagues. But we still, we see that still caused them to fight against Israel. And so this is where they needed to learn, because their view was that, their gods had all this power. The God of Israel had all this power. And so this was how they were going to learn that that their gods did not have the same power, that all the power was with the God of Israel. And so this reminded me of way back when, talking about the Egyptians. God talks about the Egyptians and Pharaoh in this way. Exodus chapter 14, verses 17 through 18, God says, "As for me, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I am honored through Pharaoh, through his chariots and his horsemen." So God's going to get the honor he deserves from this episode here. With even though the ark is with the Philistines, they're going to learn their lesson, and God is going to show that he's the one with the power, and not their gods. Anything else on question 21?
Well, we have no record where the Philistines, when they had the ark, or that anyone they touched it, where they would fall over dead. So God was not in the ark at the time. That's the way I look at it. If it was, they'd been in the ark, they couldn't touch it.
Yeah, I don't know if because it doesn't say exactly how they handled it. I don't know if they used the same poles to transport it around, if they were able to touch it at that point without being struck down. But, either way, does it go well for them having the ark? They don't get out of this without any issues, right? So whether it comes in the form of being struck down immediately like Uzzah was, or with the things that they end up being afflicted with, God's going to punish them for not treating his ark correctly.
I think it the same way as it was in Jerusalem's being destroyed. Now, the temple, whatever, at that time, God's temple, he was in the temple, of course, before.
Yeah.
But when it got time for the temple to be destroyed, he abandoned the temple. That's why they couldn't destroy the temple.
Yeah, because obviously God allowed them to do that. They didn't overpower God. That was same as God allowed the Philistines to take the ark. It wasn't against what God wanted for the ark to be taken there. God's accomplishing his purpose here by letting this happen. Kevin?
Also, I don't know, you don't read this in there, but in many ways, this ends the reign of terror of Phineas and Hophni.
Yep.
God determined that they would die, and they wouldn't be allowed to serve. And so he
Right.
puts an end to them, and like I said, they were violent men, they're dying violent death.
Yeah, because they remember that prophecy that God said they would be killed on the same day. And since they were the priests, I assume they probably didn't go into the battle themselves. So, normally they probably wouldn't have been in a position to be, attacked by the Philistines here. So this does accomplish that too, that having them go into battle with the ark allows that prophecy to be fulfilled, that they're both struck down in battle. And they get the punishment and the death that they deserve for their actions and their not treating the service of God as holy. Anything else on question 21? Okay, so let's look at what happens as a result of the ark being taken here in this battle. So let's see what happens with Eli, or what his reaction is to this. So question 22, what report did Eli hear back from the battle line?
First, that his sons had been killed in battle.
Right.
And I think the second question would be answered in what followed.
Yes. So let's see what happens. So we see in that it says in verse 12 of chapter 4 that a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he came, behold, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road, eagerly watching. And what is it that he's watching for? Is he watching to see if they're going to win the battle? Is he watching to see if his sons are going to come back safely? What is it that his focus is on? It says because his heart was trembling for the ark of God. So that's what his focus is on here. So it says that the man came to tell it in the city, and all the city cried out. And it says in verse 14, when Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he said, "What does the noise of this commotion mean?" Then the man came hurriedly and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were set so that he could not see. The man said to Eli, "I am the one who came from the battle line. Indeed, I escaped from the battle line today." And he said, "How did things go, my son?" And so this man's going to give Eli tell him what the result of the battle was. So he's going to tell him what things are happening here. But which of the reports that he gives is going to cause what you could call a strong reaction from Eli?
The fact that the Ark of the Covenant was captured.
Yes. So we see that he tells him, first he says, Israel has fled before the Philistines. There's been a great slaughter among the people, and your two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. So he tells those first three things, but we don't see that there's any major reaction from Eli on those. But then the last thing that's said is that the ark of God has been taken. And so this is what Eli reacts to. And so in verse 18 it says, when he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell off the seat backward beside the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for he was old and heavy. Thus he judged Israel 40 years. And this concludes the time of Eli being the judge. See, not a happy ending for Eli, but this goes along with what God had prophesied against him, that he and his family were going to be punished for the way they had treated things. And so, sad ending for someone who should have, been very, someone that had a lot of potential as the leader of Israel. Could also be a lesson here about be careful how you sit in a chair, maybe. But
Yeah.
I think there was other factors that caused Eli's demise here. So,
Well, you had to say he was fat, but.
yeah.
The guy was fat and old, so he.
That factors into it. We actually talked about this, if you remember, way back when we talked about Ehud and Eglon. I had a true and false question there where I said, is there anywhere else in the Bible that describes an individual as being fat? And here it is. Eli is here in one of the judges is described that way. So, so that is the end of our 14th judge, Eli.
Well, and Eli recognizes his complicity in this, in the role of what he had as being, and I'm assuming he was high priest.
Yeah.
In that role, it was his responsibility. That ark was not supposed to leave the Holy of Holies.
Right.
It was supposed to stay in there, and he was only supposed to go into it one time a year.
Right.
And so he's as guilty as anyone else for allowing that thing to be taken from the tabernacle.
Right. It shows his lack of leadership and his lack of control over, his sons and the people. And as the high priest, he should have been in control of that and say, no, this is not happening. But see that at this point that he's, that I'm sure that he was against this happening, but it's still, the ark is still taken into battle. And so we see the failure of his leadership to not allow the ark to be used in an appropriate way. So that's the end of Eli, and the way his time as judge comes to a conclusion. Anything else on question 22? Okay. One more question in this section and in chapter 4. One more reaction to this happening. So let's look at the Eli's daughter-in-law, the wife of his son Phinehas. So what happens to her when she hears this news? Yes, so she was pregnant near to giving birth, and she hears this news. And so it says, verse 19, when she heard the news that the ark of God was taken and that her father-in-law and her husband had died, she kneeled down and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. And then in verse 20 it says that about the time of her death, the women who stood by her said to her, do not be afraid, for you have given birth to a son. But she did not answer or pay attention. So the second part of the question, what is the name that she gives her son, and what is the meaning of that name? Yes. So the meaning is that the glory has departed from Israel. So it says in verse 21 that she called the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel because the ark of God was taken, and because of her father-in-law and her husband." She said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God was taken." So again, we see kind of similar to Eli, that when she's talking about this, the glory has departed from Israel, it's not because of Eli dying or her husband dying. What is it that's causing the glory to depart from Israel? Because the ark of God being taken. And so see that of all the things that have happened here, the Israelites being defeated in battle, there being a great slaughter, Eli and his 2 sons dying, that of all this, the most tragic thing that's happened here is the ark of God being taken. And so a very dark time in the history of Israel here. But again, who is it that's in control of all this? God is still in control. And so even though things are looking very dark, God is going to make his purposes come to pass, and he's going to get the honor he deserves from all this. Anything else on that section? Eli is a judge, chapter 4. Okay, so we're going to take a little detour as far as the judges go, and we're going to follow the ark through chapters 5 and 6 and see what happens as it's with the Philistines. So, question 1 of the section, Ark of the Covenant and the Philistines. We move into 1 Samuel chapter 5. Where did the Philistines take the ark first?
Ashdod.
Yes, so they take it to one of their major cities, which is Ashdod. And so what is the place that they take it to there?
The house of Dagon. God.
Yes, so they take it into the temple of their idol, whose name is Dagon. And so it says they took the ark of God and brought it to the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And so what happens while the ark is there in that place?
God struck them with tumors.
Yes, so that's God's going to inflict them with some plagues as a punishment for this. What happens there in the temple of Dagon from the ark being there? And David mentioned this before already.
Dagon fell on his face to the ground, and so they set him back up again, and the next time Dagon fell, as mentioned, broke off his head and his hands.
Yeah, it's an interesting way that God shows the his power here. That it says, so first off, on the first day, that first it just says that Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord, and so they just doesn't seem like they put much into that. They just pick him up and put him back in his place. But then the next day, he's fallen over again, but this time the palms of his hands broke off. So this time he's takes some damage when he falls down. So again, the point here is that God is showing that their God is not real, doesn't have any power, that he's the one that has the power. And this is, like we were saying, this is where the Philistines are going to be taught a lesson here about God having the power. Anything else on question 1? Okay. Question 2. We have this too. The question 2. What was it that happened to the Philistines in Ashdod that made them want the ark to be taken somewhere else?
The tumors that God struck them with.
Yes, so it says that the hand of the Lord was heavy on the Ashdodites, and he ravaged them and smote them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territories. When the men of Ashdod saw that it was so, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is severe on us and on Dagon our God." So I looked up a little bit to try to see what maybe these tumors were. There's some different opinions on what people think that this would be. We don't know for sure what this was. I think some of the language that I saw, some people think that it could be like hemorrhoids is what they were experiencing here. Also, it could be similar to like the boils that the Egyptians experienced as one of their plagues. Also later on, it mentions that mice or rats were involved with this. So some people think maybe this was, a bubonic plague sort of thing happening here. But or I think too that tumors, you could actually have tumors that can like grow on your body that are just underneath your skin. That'd be very, very painful. So whatever it is that these tumors are, it's giving them lots of pain and suffering, and a lot of them are being killed by this too. And so it's to the extent that they no longer want the ark to be with them. And so they say, please send it somewhere else so that we can stop being afflicted by all this.
But didn't these things have to be visible? Because isn't that one of the things they said is an atonement?
Yeah,
With the ark?
that's true. Yeah, because they
I
did,
mean, it had to be something that was visible on their body.
right.
In order to
true.
know what it looked like.
So-
That's odd. It's very odd, but
Yeah.
evidently it was rough and painful. They didn't want any more to do with it.
Yeah, because when they end up sending the ark back later, they make 5 golden tumors to send back. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly what it was, but it had to be something visible, like you're saying, that you could make something that looked like it. But this is the way that God is afflicting them as a punishment for them being around. So like you were saying before, Steve, that God doesn't strike them down, that we see here like he did with Uzzah, but God is instead afflicting them with these tumors, and it's causing them great suffering. So they no longer want the ark to be there. They say, please take it somewhere else. Anything else on question 2? Okay. Question 3. So where is the ark taken next in verse 8?
Gath.
Yes, so they determined to take the ark to Gath, which is another one of the major cities of the Philistines. And so they take the ark there. And do things go any better when the ark is taken there? Nope. Same thing happens. Although it mentions here that the hand of the Lord was against the city with very great confusion. And he smote the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So you see the tumors again, but this time it mentions that there's also great confusion. So I don't know if that's from the tumors or if that's another thing that God is causing there, but we also see that confusion is part of the suffering that the Philistines received from this. So, question, or,
That's the men too.
oh, right, yeah. It's all ages. It says that both young and old are suffering with this. So it was affecting all the people there. Question 4, so they end up moving it again. And so what is the next city that the ark is taken to?
Ekron.
Yes, so Ekron, another major city of the Philistines. And so you see this time it says that as the ark came to Ekron, the Ekronites cried out, saying, they have brought the ark of the God of Israel round to us to kill us and our people. So by this third occasion, the people are like, don't bring that here. We don't want the ark here because that's going to cause us to have the same afflictions that the other places have. And so do they end up having the same issues that the other 2 cities had?
Seems like there's worse.
Yeah.
Deadly confusion.
Yeah, so second part of that question, what did the Philistines decide to do with the ark at this point, since no one wants it anymore?
Someone send it back.
Yes. So since no one wants it now, the lords of the Philistines, they determine that they need to send the ark of God of Israel away, return it to its own place so that it will not kill us and our people. And in verse 11, it says, for there was a deadly confusion throughout the city. The hand of God was very heavy there. And the men who did not die were smitten with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. So yeah, it may have been that it seemed like maybe even this round of the affliction was even more severe. And so we see that so it seems like the people were struck with the tumors, whether they lived or not. So I don't know if it's from the tumors that people were dying, or if it was, maybe in this case it was God like striking down the people here. But you see here, yeah, it says there's a deadly confusion throughout the city, and it's causing many to die, and then those who are not dying are suffering greatly, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. So it's not going well for the Philistines, and so they finally determined, we don't want the ark with us anymore. It needs to go back. Time for it to go.
We had the Philistines here cry out to God.
Yes.
And prison.
Yeah. So they're crying out from all their suffering. They're looking for relief from all this, and so it's time for them to decide what they need to do to make all this suffering go away. So let's go into chapter 6. Question 5. How long had the ark been with the Philistines at this point?
7 months.
Yes. So at this point, it was 7 months since the ark had been taken in the battle, and it's been so severe that they're already done with it and ready to send it away. So who is it that they consult with to figure out what they need to do with the ark?
They're priests and diviners,
Yes. So they're gonna
magicians.
call for their priests, their diviners, their magicians, to figure out what they need to do with the ark. And so we're actually going to see the advice that they receive here is actually the correct advice. They get good advice from these men here. So, question 6: what items would the Philistines send back along with the ark? Because the priests, the diviners,
Trespass offering.
yes, because they say not to send back the ark empty. Says that they need to return him a guilt offerings. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. So they're realizing that they need to do more than just send it back. They need to, make atonement for their wrongdoing. And so then the items that they're going to send back with the ark, they're going to make these 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. And so this is where we learn that on top of the tumors, that there's also some aspect where these mice or rats have also been causing them issues. And so whether that's connected to the tumors or whether the mice or rats were maybe devastating their crops, either way, we see that it's the tumors and the mice that both factor in to this here. And so they say that they need to make 5 of each of those according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. Make likenesses of your tumors and likenesses of your mice that ravage the land, and you shall give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will ease his hand from you, your gods, and your land. So the second part of the question, what previous event did they recount as a reason for trying to appease God? Down here in verse 6.
That's interesting that these foreign people, they recognize what God did with the people earlier. He says, why would you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts?
Yeah, over and over again you see there's always the people around Israel are always recounting what happened with the Egyptians, right? You see over and over again that when they were coming through, the Exodus, the nations around were terrified of them because they heard about what was done to the Egyptians. And so this kind of follows Israel wherever they go. But it's always interesting. It's like the other nations around Israel always seems like they remember these events happening more than the Israelites themselves do. The Israelites themselves seem to keep forgetting about this, but the nations around Israel remember this happening. So in verse 6, they say, why then do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? When he had severely dealt with them, did they not allow the people to go and they departed? So they're saying you need to, if the Egyptians were willing to let the people go, then you should too. And then hopefully that will appease God, so he will stop, bringing out all these plagues on us. Anything else on question 6?
Yeah, that's interesting because it's not like that just happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
According to what Stephen in his address to the Sanhedrin, that had taken place well over 400 years earlier.
Right.
And again, other nations, like you said, 400 years later, other nations know that.
Yes, so this is still very fresh on their minds, even hundreds of years later, they remember this happening. But then again, it's like the Israelites don't remember this happening, so it doesn't affect them like it does the other nations. So it's always interesting how these other nations seem to remember those events more than the Israelites themselves do. So, question 7. So what is their strategy for sending the ark back to the Israelites? Are they going to take it back to them themselves, march it up to Israel?
They decided to put it on a new cart and have it pulled back up on the cows that never had been yoked before. They took their calves away from them and took them up this cart and sent it away.
Yeah, so they were going to release the ark that way and see what happens with it.
Let them go their own way instead of guiding them.
Yes, so we see that they weren't going to take it up there directly. They're just going to put it on this cart with these cows, controlling it, and then just release the cows. And so what is it that would indicate to them whether this suffering that they had experienced had been caused by God or not?
Back to that sheep.
Yes, so they're, the way that they say they're going to know whether this was caused by God or not is that if it goes back toward the territory of Israel, then they would know that God had been the one that had done this. But if they went any other way, then they would know that it was not God that had done it, that it would have happened to them by chance. Which I feel like at this point they should have known it was God doing it, but this is their last test to tell who it was that caused this. So,
It is interesting that they recognize the holiness of the ark.
Mhm.
The whole idea that they put it on a new cart that had never been used.
yeah.
They hooked it and built cows that had never been used that way.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like something that God would tell them to do, right? Like use a cow that was unblemished to make the sacrifices or things like that. They kind of, again, it's one of those where sometimes it seems like these other nations figure things out better than the Israelites would. But yeah, so that's their strategy to send it back. Anything else on question 7? Okay. So what happens then when they set up the ark there on that cart with the cows and then release it? Yes, so it says, so they put it in the cart with the cows, directing it. And they've got the ark there with the box with the golden mice and the tumors. And it says that the cows took the straight way in the direction of Beth Shemesh. They went along the highway and did not turn aside to the right or to the left. So we see that not only did they go back the direction toward Israel, they actually take the highway and they go directly there. So we see that God is definitely directing this to have the ark returned.
Just the fact they didn't the cart up.
Yeah.
That's true. Animals that you talked to for the first time.
Yeah, you think again about Uzzah and that time that they were there, making sure that the ark was not going to get upset or whatever. That it is, impressive that going, with just releasing them on their own, to see that they stay on the highway and the ark doesn't get knocked off or anything. That it goes back on the road back to Israel.
Seems to be that God doesn't get down it all the way, but shoot
Yes.
out there. That's wrong. Got to
Yeah, 'cause, again, they were wanting to get confirmation that God was the one that had caused all this, and so God says, "All right, I will show you." And so the ark is now returned to Israel. Yeah, we'll come back to that one next week. So we'll finish up the last two questions on that next week and see how the Israelites react to receiving the ark back. And then we will go from there. I'm going to set up the next page of questions and plan on giving those out on Wednesday, so they should be ready to go for next week. So we'll finish up those last two questions on this page and then move into chapter 7 and see what happens with the Israelites once they receive the ark back. Thank you all for the comments and questions.